While we could always expect the Goombas and Bullet Bills to be in the Mario games, there are some awesome ones that are rarely seen, and in this video I'll be focusing on them, listing 10 underused enemies that should be implemented into more games. The only enemies I'm excluding are bosses, and the 10 that I talked about in my top 10 Mario enemies that should be in more games video, as this is a very similar topic of video, so it would basically be saying the same things about each of the enemies from that video in this one. And with that being said, I'm Siiroth, and let's get started. For number 10, I chose the Crabber. Only appearing in the two Galaxy games, these enemies are very cool, but also underused. On the surface, they just seem like regular crab enemies, however there's a little more depth to them than just that. They have one large pincer and one small pincer. I wonder what the inspiration was for this enemy. They're often seen in the beach galaxies within the two games and come in two colors, both red and blue. They can only be defeated by spinning on its backside, which could be a difficult task because these enemies are supposed to always face Mario. This is made much more difficult with the fact that the Crabbers can use their large pincer to defend themselves. Even though the Crabbers are a pain to take down, it would be very beneficial for you to do so because upon dying, they will give some star bits to Mario. The blue Crabbers aren't as easy to defeat though. These guys will run away from Mario upon seeing him, which makes you have to chase them down for the reward. But this time, the reward is much greater, being an extra life. This is a very interesting concept because you have to risk a life trying to take the enemy down. However, if you do so, it will be very helpful and well worth your efforts. This is a concept that I would really like to see again, the battle of risk versus reward. And while this isn't an extreme example, as the Crabbers are not incredibly difficult to take down, it is still a small step in making the player think some more. By implementing some very minuscule puzzles into the game which offer the player choice to attempt to obtain the reward. This makes me really enjoy encountering the Crabbers and why they should be implemented into more Mario games. The next enemy that I'll be talking about is the Cobra. This is an enemy that made its debut in Super Mario Bros. 2, the Doki Doki Panic one. These enemies normally hide in pots or in the sand and then pop out from them, which could damage your character. They are able to spit out projectiles, and they also appear in the Super Mario Advance version of Mario 3, in which they are the changed form of the king who rules the grassland. They would then go on to appear in Mario Pinball Land as enemies, and then appear in Mario Kart 7 as hazards on stage Shy Guy Bazaar, where, like in Mario 2, they hide in vases, although this time the vases move around, trying to make the racer hit them. And when that happens, a bunch of Cobrats fly out of it. I really like the concept of this enemy, and it's extremely unique. It absolutely baffles me to see just how underutilized these enemies are. I think that the transition to 3D games can be seamless, as the popping out of the vase concept is definitely not something you would think to be an exclusive to a 2D title. These enemies are a ton of fun to encounter in Mario games, which is why I'd love to see them return in the future. For number 8, I'll be talking about the Flipperus. Flipperuses are pink walruses first introduced in New Super Mario Bros. U, although they are pretty difficult to find within the game as they only appear in 2 levels, although one of them is named Flipperus Lake and it's based around them obviously. The interesting concept about this enemy is that it will throw snowballs at you like the Snow Spike, although there are many differences between those two enemies, such as the snowball that the Flippers throws doesn't continually get larger as with the Snow Spikes. The Flippers will also throw theirs much higher in the air, and they move as well, which the Snow Spikes don't tend to do. The only other appearance they make is in Mario Party 10. They are in a minigame called Ice Slide, You Slide, where you have to go underneath them. I really like how they're used here, and I feel that if they're included in 3D games, they could also work very well, having a similar transition to that of the Spike, where they can appear in groups to increase the challenge they create upon you encountering them. Because the snowballs can temporarily freeze you in place, I think that this enemy could be placed in some more interesting combinations in Mario games to make this enemy even more difficult. Imagine a combination of the Flippers and the Bullet Bills, with the player being frozen in place and then taken out with a Bullet Bill shot. I would love to see these implemented into more games, as only being in 2 makes them severely underutilized. For number 7, I chose the Bully. I know they seem basic, however I still think they're a great enemy concept that's very underused in the Mario games. They made their debut in Mario 64 in Lethal Lava Land, where they were the focal point of multiple missions, requiring you to knock them off of their platform into the lava. At first glance, this seems pretty simple, and I'm not gonna lie to you, it is. However, at points the bullies can shock you by unexpectedly ramming into you and knocking you into the lava, causing you to potentially take a lot of damage and possibly end your Lethal Lava Land experience. For a very easy world overall, overall in Super Mario 64, at least the bully missions add a slight challenge to the experience. You're able to defeat them by punching or kicking them from behind, which is the more effective method because they can't charge at you if you're behind them, and the kick is more effective at launching them in general. After 64, they took a long absence until the remake, and then they appeared in 3D World where they had a strong appearance, even having a Prince Bully boss being based off of them. They also appeared in Mario & Luigi Paper Jam as an enemy. In the future, while I don't see them working as well in 2D titles, I still think they would be an interesting addition to the games. In terms of other spin-off appearances, they could range from minigame appearances in Mario Party games to even being a character in a Mario sports game. We know from Mario baseball games that the Goomba can swing a bat without having arms, so that obviously doesn't make a difference. However, they should always primarily be included in 3D games where they work the best in. This is what they were made for, and I think they should be put in more. At number 6 are the Splorch enemies. Fireballs have always been an integral part of the Mario series, appearing in tons of main and spin-off games alike. The Splorch, however, is an interesting variant that's only in Super Mario 3D World. In terms of what they do, it's really unexpected and can catch players off guard. Picture a lava bubble popping out of the lava, who then proceeds to start chasing Mario around the level. This is pretty much what the Splorch does. They pop out of the lava and roll at Mario, leaving a trail of harmful lava behind them as they do so. They can be a very threatening enemy to encounter, which I always enjoy seeing. They are able to be countered with items such as the Fire Flower, as you could shoot at the Splorches to knock them back into the lava. If you plan on permanently removing them, you require the use of an invincibility star, Lucky Cat suit, or the white Tanuki suit. This makes them very cool to see, and they should definitely be included in more games than they currently are. In terms of spin-off appearances, I could see them being included in tennis, soccer, golf, and again I go back to baseball. Pretty much any Mario sports game that has a ball in it. Certain balls that are implemented into Mario sports games can damage players or hinder their game in some way, and I think the Splorch could be a new version of this. Maybe after they're kicked in a Strikers game, they will leave a trail of lava behind them that could hurt players if they follow it. I'd love to know some of your ideas in the comment section, as this is one of the many that I think the Splorch could work well with. Obviously, they wouldn't work too well in 2D titles, but this isn't the end of the world. 3D games are where they shine, and I hope they see them in more, as they're obviously very underutilized. For number 5, I chose the Rammerhead, another enemy from Super Mario 3D World. This one is an underwater enemy who swims in various patterns and can be harmful to the player. Their heads are the only parts of them that inflict damage, however the other aspects about them make them a challenging encounter. One of the reasons is that they can only be defeated through the use of either the invincibility power-up or the golden statue power-up. The moments in the game which you will have to use either of these are pretty scarce, so under normal circumstances you won't be able to kill them. This means you'll have to get creative in avoiding getting taken out because of the various ways in which they move around the stage and get in your way. Because water levels provide a control scheme in which you cannot move as quickly as you normally would, this makes any enemy underwater more challenging to go up against as compared to if they were on land. Because the Rammerheads can be very large, this will also make them very hard to maneuver around. Something else that makes this enemy interesting is that some of them can jump out of the water to ram into you, which, while seen by some water enemies such as the Cheep Cheeps, is not the most common sight. This could really catch you off guard, and that's something I love about a Mario enemy. As for appearances in future installments, I think they could be used pretty well in 2D titles. Although, like many of the 3D enemies I talk about, their appearance is more geared for the third dimension. Some spin-off appearances could be interesting, like being a hazard in some underwater Mario Kart tracks. Those type of mini editions would be perfect for this enemy, as I think this concept could be well suited for those types of situations. The concept of the Rammerhead is far from revolutionary, however, in the midst of several generic Cheep Cheeps and eels being scattered throughout levels, I think it would be fun to mix it up a little bit by implementing the Rammerhead into more Mario games. Exploding at number 4 is the Bombshell Koopa. The name of this enemy makes its concept very simple to understand. It's a Koopa, but its shell is a bomb, and upon jumping on it, the bomb will explode. They are quite literally a combination of a Koopa Troopa and a Bob-omb. This is a concept that I love, however it's only been in one game, being the original Super Mario Land. For that game, they are by far the most common enemy, appearing in almost every level in the game. The concept was very unique, and I would love to see it return, however it may not be likely because they were created out of hardware issues. At the time, the developers of Super Mario Land couldn't implement the actual Koopa Troopas into the game, as the Game Boy couldn't load the shell effects properly. so they replaced it with an explosion after you defeat them. The Koopa Troopas as normal appeared in the sequel game, and the Bombshell variant hasn't been in a new game since. It's really a shame, as this type of enemy could definitely differentiate the sometimes boring sequence within a normal Mario level of mindlessly stomping on the same Koopa Troopas over and over. There are red, green, and blue colors within the games, but why not add a black one in the future with the return of the Bombshell Koopa? Because of their long absence, I think they would really catch unsuspecting players off guard when they go up against the Koopa shell, not realizing that it will explode and potentially lead to their death. Now, I must address that while in Super Mario Land, they aren't the most threatening creatures, as the radius of their explosions isn't too large. That could easily be changed for future Mario titles though, be it a 2D or 3D environment. Being this interesting of a concept and only being included in one game doesn't make much sense. They should definitely be brought back to the series because they're severely underutilized. For number 3, I chose the Squeak. This innocent seeming mouse enemy makes its only appearance in Super Mario 3D World, where it possesses the ability to run really fast and jump very high. However, they can be defeated by any attack in a similar way to the Goomba, so they seem pretty boring. Underused, however, it would be understandable as to why. However, there are some more details that I'll get into, which will hopefully convince you that these guys are more than meets the eye. So let me get back to that jumping ability. This allows them to be a pretty challenging foe to take down at points, especially when they're placed in groups, which is a very common sight to behold. This enemy is challenging not only due to its abilities, but due to the parameters in which you will normally encounter it. Almost always being found in a group of at least 2, this could be a devastating situation if you don't have any power-up that can help you withstand their onslaught. Fire flowers mean that these guys will meet their maker, because just one shot will be enough to defeat it. However, if you don't have that type of advantage, you will either find yourself chasing them around to take down, or desperately running away to hope that you could finish the level. Things don't end here, as another variation you can find in the game is known as the Spiny Squeak, which has its back covered in spikes, which means that you can no longer defeat them through the use of a jump, making an already challenging enemy increasingly more difficult to take out. So yes, while on the surface these enemies may seem basic, they are definitely not something to simply pass over, because they won't let you. I think that including them in more 3D games would be great, and 2D appearances I think would also be good for this enemy. The Squeaks could also be used well in RPGs, such as Mario and Luigi games, as an enemy that can attack you in groups using its jumping abilities. These guys are very underused, and I'd love to see them in future titles. For number 2, I chose the Wallops. This enemy is very similar to the Womp, which I've talked about in previous videos, but while the Womp may appear in plenty of Mario titles, the Wallop has only been seen in one, and that is Super Mario 3D Land. This is one appearance that I really enjoy though. Unlike the Womp, they don't try to crush the player. Instead, they move from side to side and attempt to block you from passing them. At some points, it may become difficult to get around them, which could become a good obstacle in the game that makes you have to get creative in your experience. Do you want to trick them into going one way and then suddenly go the other? Or do you want to try going over them by climbing on a platform and jumping off? It's completely up to you in terms of how you want to deal with the Wallops, which I really like. I love the freedom within Mario games, and an enemy which forces you to do it if you want to continue the level is something that I really enjoy seeing. There are some very interesting puzzles involving these enemies too, which are pretty fun. Some involve you getting on top of them to reach a star coin or a secret area, which is always interesting. These encourage exploration, which is one of the most important aspects of Mario games to me. In Super Mario 3D World, there's another version of this enemy that's introduced known as the Walleye, which is very similar. And the only primary difference being is that the Walleyes have spikes on their edges. I still prefer the Wallop as an enemy though, because of the creative scenarios that the Wallop can be placed in involving climbing on top of them. Both I would love to see in more games though, because while I always love seeing the Womp, having the Wallop in more Mario games would provide a different type of a challenge. Obviously they wouldn't work well in 2D Mario games, but I definitely see some good spin-off ideas, such as being included in Mario Kart as an obstacle that will attempt to prevent you from going around it. This one is very underused in games, and I think it should definitely be in more. And for the number 1 spot, I chose the Chargin Chucks. They made their debut in Super Mario World, and right out of the gate, these enemies were loved by the Mario fans. Chargin Chucks appear in a variety of different ways in Super Mario World in terms of how they attack. Some just charge at you, while some kick footballs at you. They cannot be defeated by a single stomp either, which is something that makes them even more difficult to take out. After Mario World, they took a long absence from the Mario series. However, in 2013, with the release of Super Mario 3D World, the Chargin Chucks made their much anticipated return, and they also appeared in Captain Toad Treasure Tracker along with the Mario and Luigi Paper Jam game as enemies. This is definitely the time in which we'll see the Chargin Chucks revived. Nintendo just realized how good of a concept the Chargin Chucks was, and because of that, they have now had a pretty strong comeback. However, at this point, I still consider them underused. Being in 4 games isn't the largest amount of exposure you can get, and I'm sure there are still an incredible amount of opportunities to creatively implement the Chargin Chucks into Mario levels in the future. They haven't been in a 2D game since Mario World, so another one of those appearances would be nice to see. I like their 3D World appearance too, showing that they could just have a seamless transition between both game types. Mario and Luigi Paper Jam showed that they could be good enemies in those types of games too. Perhaps being involved in Mario Party minigames would be another interesting step for this enemy, and I could even see it becoming a playable character in Mario Kart if Nintendo wants to go the extra mile with it. There are many ways that the Chargin Chucks can be used in the future, and I can't wait to find out how. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to see more videos just like this one. If you want to see the video I made listing the top 10 Mario enemies who should be in more games, click the link on the left side of the screen. Peace out.